looking at our history from the indigenous period come forward. And as most of you will know or remember, that recently Nicole Phillip launched a book on the junior history of Grenada. I think it's a book for all Grenadians. It's not just for the junior students, and that is in keeping with this whole trust towards telling our story, because this book is the first time in the history of Grenada that we are telling our stories ourselves. We are writing our own narratives, and so that is so very important. So in keeping with that trust to regain our history, tell our narratives, tell our stories, that was a very good start to the whole 50th anniversary. The anniversary, the celebration or commemoration will extend for 1 year, the entire Jubilee year. And so activities are spread out over a wide range of dates and events, and so Orlando is going to speak a little more to the events, but we are spreading it out for the entire year with some very specific celebratory and commemorative activities in and around the 7th of February. So Orlando is you can take over and continue.
Pleasant good morning, everybody. To the viewers online, the media who is present here in the room. As Dr. Crawford mentioned, the celebrations is going to be an extended celebration. It officially starts on the 19th of October, which will be the launch of our Independence celebration. Again, the 19th of October, the launch of our Independence celebration, and it will span the entire 2024, ending in February 2025. We have done a lot of planning in terms of how we want the composition of the celebration to flow. And it's broken up into two major phases. The first phase is the pre-independence phase. And within that phase, we have planned out 21 national events. Those are events that will be executed by the state. And we also have events that we will endorse from the private sector. There are a lot of persons who have reached out to the Secretariat wanting to do events around independence, and we are evaluating those events, and we will then endorse some of these events as additional events for the public to participate in. The official pre-independence celebrations will start in October 19th and will end on February 9th, 2024. All right. We've also curated a special list of events from January 28th, 2024 to February 9th, 2024, that would allow not just Grenadians, but persons in the diaspora to ensure that they can come back and participate in that block of events. So it's going to be about 10 days of intense events and activities and celebrations that the diaspora will be able to participate in, and any foreign person who wants to come in to participate in our independence can do so. We will make that full list of events available so persons can begin their pre-planning and booking for the event. We expect to see a lot of persons on island. And we expect for it to be events that are well attended and well executed. The events will span from sporting events to festive events to cultural events to academic/conference type events. We have a plethora of different activities to ensure that we cover all aspects of our 50 years of independence, our history, our people, and absolutely our future. The post-independence celebrations will start on March 2024 and will end in January 2025. Those events are designed for what we call parish celebrations. So every parish will have their independent celebrations, each following a specific theme and guideline. And essentially, each parish will have a month where they have designated as their parish celebration month. In addition to the events, we also will see the installation of several sites of memories across the island, which is quite important for us to really document and iconize our history and our people. So you will see the installation of monuments and statues, the renaming of streets, and several other activities that will really help define Grenada in this modern time. As I mentioned, the launch will be on the 19th, and of course, all persons are invited to this launch. It's going to be a spectacle. It's going to be an event that persons, I don't think you would want to miss. More information will follow in the coming days. We will be launching our website, which will provide a lot of information about that. The website URL will be GRENADATurns50.gd. And also the email address for the Secretariat is also info@GRENADATurns50.gd. So persons can reach out to us. The Secretariat will be fully staffed, and I will allow Ms. Gail Purcell to speak a little bit about the composition and the operations of the Secretariat.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Under the leadership of Dr. Wendy Crawford as our chairperson, I will be heading up the Secretariat for the 50th anniversary of independence celebrations. We have established, at this point, we're still operating slightly virtual, but we have established a location for our Secretariat on the Carnage. We'll be housed in the former building that, the building that formerly housed the tropical shipping on the Carnage. And once we have moved in, we're in the process of preparing the space to move in, and we will be a fully staffed, as Mr. Romain indicated. The Secretariat is intended to be the center of the celebrations, the nerve center, I guess you can call it, where all things independence will go through. That Secretariat, the execution will be leading on the execution of the events in collaboration with the various subcommittees. Each of the events has an organizing body. The Secretariat is there to ensure that the flow of the organization and the implementation of the events happens smoothly. Mr. Romain would have made mention that we are in the process of launching our website, which will be up in the coming days. In the interim, we know that there are a number of people who want to have communication, have dialogue, and be in touch with someone with reference to the organization of activities. They can reach out to us by email currently. The email address, I think it was mentioned, but I will repeat it, is info@GRENADATurns50.gd. In time, we will be a fully staffed operation to be able to respond to the public's needs. And on launch, I think you will learn greater details in terms of some of the activities we also envision for the operation of the Secretariat. Yeah.
Just one more point. So for the launch on the 19th, again, as I mentioned, it's going to be a spectacle. We have several installations planned for the Carnage. It's going to be on the Carnage. And we'll use this event to officially unveil the Independence theme song, and the Independence logo, together with the full list of events for the remaining celebration period. So again, the 19th of October, make it a date. Don't be late.
Thank you so much to the National Organizing Committee. And of course, we heard from Dr. Wendy Crawford. She's the chairperson of the National Organizing Committee for the 50th anniversary celebrations. And Mr. Orlando Romain and Ms. Gail Purcell. She will be setting up the Secretariat. So we look forward to hearing more. And I know some of you have burning questions. We're going to take those questions at the end of all the presentations. All right. At this time, joining us to the head table is our Minister for Legal Affairs, Labor, Consumer Affairs, and the Attorney General, Senator Claudette Joseph, and she will be presenting on wages.
Thank you, Madam Press Secretary. Good morning, Prime Minister, other persons of the Celebrations Committee, the Independence Celebrations Committee here, and especially our friends in the members of the media. It is my pleasure to be able to report to you on the progress of the work of the Wages Advisory Committee. As you know, the Wages Advisory Committee is set up by law, the Employment Act, and is mandated to to have a review of the minimum wages in the country every 3 years. And in keeping with that requirement, and being conscious of the fact that the last time a wages advisory committee was constituted to review the minimum wages was in 2011. One of the things we set about doing early is setting up the wages advisory committee. That committee was constituted on September 1st of 2022 and has, since its constitution, traversed the entire length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, consulting with all relevant stakeholders, the general public, employers, and specific sectors of employers and employees, with a view to revising the minimum wage in Grenada upward. And the committee served its report, which was considered by the cabinet in August. In August, and with the agreement of cabinet, the committee has embarked on a second round of consultations, having made its recommendations to cabinet with the intent that these recommendations will be passed into law to come into effect on 1st January 2024. So what we have, some of the highlights coming out of the final report, which deviated from the current minimum wage structure, include equalizing, a recommendation to equalize the minimum wage across gender. As most of us will know, we have a disparity right now between male and female workers in certain sectors, particularly the agriculture sector. And that, the recommendation, should be a thing of the past as we move towards greater equality among our workers across gender. The other change would be inclusion in the categories of workers covered by the minimum wages order of certain sectors not previously included. And these include the call centers, people in the call center sector, certain workers in the construction sector that were left out previously, laborers and helpers, and also media workers. We also are going to be introducing in Grenada for the first time the concept of a baseline minimum wage, which would capture persons and categories of workers not specifically mentioned in the order. And that is the subject of the second round of consultations now ongoing. The recommendation of the committee is $60 per day wage across the board, so that in any given sector, the minimum wage should not be less than $60 a day. So the usual categories of workers are covered: machine operators, cutters, mechanics, cleaners, clerical workers, security guards, domestic workers, caregivers, and that includes persons in early childhood care, workers in bakeries, agricultural workers, construction workers, all categories of construction workers, transportation, the hospitality sectors, utility workers, now call centers, and so on, media workers. So this is where we are. We are now, the consultations are ongoing and they are taking place with the stakeholders, specific stakeholders. And so that is why perhaps you would not hear public consultations announced just yet. So entities such as the GIDC, the Hotel and Tourism Association, the call center operators, the construction company, the bus associations, public sector, senior managers, the Ministry of Agriculture, considering that they have a big chunk of workers, agricultural workers covered by the order, manufacturers, bakery associations, security companies, civil society organizations, media workers. So these are the entities who are now being engaged on a one-on-one in this round of consultation. And we aim, just as soon as the budget consultations that are now taking place, as soon as they're over, we're going to have at least one major public consultation where the recommendations of the advisory committee will be put to the public for questions and scrutiny. So we want to ensure that the entire nation is with us when this new minimum wages order comes into effect, especially employers who are going to be affected and employers, and employees. We want to make sure the economic impact is positive and that we collectively lift our people above what is now considered the poverty line. Minimum wages in many instances fall below the poverty line. So we essentially have people working to remain in poverty. And this change we want to make once we bring the new order into force in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Claudette Joseph, Minister with responsibility for legal affairs, labor, and consumer affairs. And this time we want to invite to make presentations on the Kawana Bay Settlement, Crown Lands, and National Security, Honorable Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Neela, and pleasant morning to members of the media who are here with us in person, as well as those who are online, and a special good morning to the citizens of Petite Martinique, Carriacou, and Grenada joining us for this press briefing. I want to speak a little about our independence celebration, though, before we get into the three main items, and I want to highlight that the launch of the independence celebrations on the 50th anniversary independence celebrations on the 19th of October is no accident. The 19th of October, as we all know, is a significant, if not tragic, date in Grenada's history, particularly over the last 40 years. And so the cabinet will take the decision, and we will give instructions that the necessary legal work is done to declare the 19th of October a national holiday. And the intent is to make that national holiday a permanent holiday. The tragic events of October 19th are events that we need to commemorate, that we need to reflect on, and that we need to make sure that we learn the sober lessons. Many of our brothers and sisters, a sitting prime minister and significant members of his cabinet, as you know, were tragically killed on that day. And as we begin to turn into a 50th anniversary of our nation's infancy, as Dr. Crawford indicated, it is important that we remember this event to ensure that we learn the lessons and that we do not, in fact, ever get to a point where this is ever repeated in the history of Grenada. As part of the 50th anniversary celebrations as well, covering the entire year, the government intends to embark upon, with public support and consultation, the naming of our first national heroes as part of our 50th anniversary celebrations. And so we certainly will have names proposed, and we would invite feedback from the public. We are hoping that we can name a minimum of 3 and perhaps no more than 5 national heroes, because obviously being recognized as a national hero is the highest award or honor that any nation can bestow upon its citizens. And so we are looking forward to that happening. We also anticipate, and at a further briefing we will indicate once we are able to successfully do so, we also anticipate being able to acquire lands that we can dedicate to creating a National Heroes Park, where those persons who are in fact named as national heroes, where some bus or other memorabilia of them can be erected at the national park. And this is a venture that we are quite excited about. We hope that by the time we get to the official launch of our 50th anniversary celebrations commencement, that we would be in a position to provide further details to members of the public on this initiative. So that is something that we certainly look forward to, and we would stay tuned for further details on this. If I could perhaps, since we're talking about the national park, speak to the issue of the government's policy on Crown lands. And in this case, we are speaking here to strategic Crown lands, particularly in the south of the island, that to a large extent drives our tourism product. And we can start with sites starting from the Point Salines, coming up to the Grandlands beach area. Our government has taken the policy decision, and we are going to reiterate this by bringing the necessary legislation to Parliament to support this, that any lands which are owned by the state of Grenada and which have not yet been sold as freehold will only be transferred via leasehold. So I'm going to repeat: any lands which have not yet been transferred as freehold and which still remains in the hands of the state of Grenada in these strategic locations will only be transferred via way of leasehold. And so that includes the vast majority of Grandlands Beach by way of example. And the government has taken steps during the last several months to ensure that that happens. And I will give two examples. The single largest acreage on Grandlands Beach is the site that houses the Radisson Hotel. That site has always been leasehold until former administrations made the decision to in fact transfer what we call the reversion to the lease or the freehold to private individuals. I will not get into the rationale or reasons for why that was done. The long and short of it, though, is that this year we faced the unenviable situation that even the reversion to the freehold could have been further transferred to a private individual. What that meant is that the rents that the government once collected from having leased the site to the hotelier was in fact being paid to a private individual, and we were not collecting the rent. It also meant that we had no control over the site because we were not the landlord, and therefore we could not enforce the lease, nor could we speak to any future development of the site. And so the government took the decision to in fact repurchase the reversion from Timebook Holdings Limited. That transaction is scheduled to be closed on October 15th, and henceforth the government will become the landlord. It will once again begin resuming the rent collections, and it would put us as landlord in a position to in fact ensure that the lease is complied with, but I think more importantly, be able to ensure that we remain the development partner with the hotelier for the future development of the site. There is also a smaller piece of land located in Grandlands, which abuts the Koyaba Hotel and is located behind the Umbrella site. This land was also Crown land, which was transferred to the National Insurance Scheme in a land for debt scheme that took place many years ago, where the government transferred several lots of land to the National Insurance Scheme to satisfy debts that were unpaid by the government to the National Insurance Scheme. The National Insurance Scheme has in recent time taken a decision to in fact sell some of these lots of land so that it could become more liquid, and the Minister for Social Security has been keeping the public abreast of the several initiatives by the NIS to ensure the survivability of the NIS, and therefore liquidating some of these assets is part of this strategy for NIS. However, given the strategic location of this piece of land on Grandlands, the government also intervened to ensure that the land will be transferred via leasehold, and that the government will become the landlord, and so that the new tenant who is there will be treating with and partnering with the government. I come lastly to the Kawana Bay site. This site formerly housed the hotel known as Flamboyant Hotel, and subsequent to the closure of the Flamboyant Hotel was transferred by the government of Grenada, not via leasehold, which is what Flamboyant Hotel had, but via freehold to the development company True Blue Bay Development Limited. which is the company that created the Kawana Bay project and had an approved CBI status for that project. As the nation well knows, not too long ago, the former administration led by Dr. Mitchell and the developer Kawana Bay had a very public and unfortunate falling out. And this led to the developer taking the state of Grenada to arbitration before the International Court for the Settlement of Investment Disputes, known as, in short, ICSID, and sued the state of Grenada for several tens of millions of dollars. And the site became a white elephant. The construction ceased. The site was closed down and it has sat there for the last 2 years or more. Upon assuming office, the government took the decision that we could not simply allow perhaps what is one of the most spectacular sites on Grandlands Beach, and certainly the most spectacular view, to become a white elephant dominating the landscape at that end of Grandlands Beach, Monterey area. And so for a protracted period of time, the government, first led by a cabinet-approved committee, and I want to stop here and signal our gratitude to that committee. The committee was led by Mr. Richard Duncan, and it included Ms. Leslie Ann Sion, Mr. Hassan Hadid, and Mr. Henry Joseph. They led the negotiations initially to try and see how this matter could be resolved. And I want to thank them for the time and effort that they put into this matter, because although it was not resolved under their watch, specifically, they certainly contributed significantly towards advancing the matter. In summary, the government made the decision to acquire the site so that we could, in fact, put ourselves in a position to have fresh negotiations with a new developer so that this project could, in fact, be completed successfully, so that construction could resume, so that several hundreds of Grenadians who were once working on the site and who became unemployed as a result of the construction site closing could look forward to resumption of work on the site, to resumption of employment, and ultimately to a hotel actually being completed on the site. So the government has acquired the site. It has acquired the site at a cost of $22 million US. We will be making the necessary payments between now and next year to the main owner of the site. The result of this is that the arbitration proceedings between the developer and the state of Grenada has come to an end. And we are happy to report that because the legal fees associated with defending the ICSID arbitration was running the people of Grenada into the several hundreds of thousands of US, if not, it had already reached millions of US in legal fees for a dispute that we felt was certainly not necessary and one that was created and should never have happened in the first place. Having acquired the site, the government is currently engaged in significant and advanced discussions with potential developers over their taking over the site to resume construction. At this stage, we have not yet concluded a definitive deal, but we feel quite optimistic that we would be in a position to come back shortly to announce the conclusion of this definitive deal. I will make this point though, the site will only be transferred via leasehold. It will not be transferred via freehold. And so we can expect that as this government continues, it will ensure that it protects the patrimony of Grenada. It will ensure that we put future generations of Grenadians in a position where if developers do not do what they commit to do, that we're in a position to renegotiate with them, that we're in a position to get them to give up the lease without having to resort to court and litigation and arbitration. And I say this because there are clear examples where if the lands are transferred as freehold, the government has literally no leverage on any of these developers, and they can simply sit on the site and speculate as they wish. And so we will not countenance this. If persons, whether local or if they are foreigners who are coming in to invest, wish to obtain strategic state assets, particularly in the tourism property development market, we must ensure that they commit and do the things they say they will do as we partner with them and as we support them. But if they don't, we need to put the nation in a position where they can easily regain control over the site. So as I said, we intend to back this policy decision up with the necessary legislation to support this. And so once we have concluded the ongoing negotiations and settled with a particular developer, we'll come back to brief the nation as to where we are with this. I want to move quickly to the issue of national security. Like many of our citizens, and as Minister for National Security, I think we can well imagine my own consternation and significant concern over the state of gun-related homicides that we've had in Grenada. And I want to emphasize here that for the most part, crime in Grenada has been trending downwards, save for this issue